self-assessment will work for you. Interestingly, is where you put most of your energy. So yes, this is as an opportunity, for to do that self-assessment, but comes with a caveat: it takes time. And we'll talk again, throughout this session about where you can put most of your energy. And of course, I'm going to show you, from the House of PMO, you get access as a membership benefit to be able to do your self-assessment online using a tool. You can use the book. It's there. You can do the assessment in the back of it. But for a lot of people, it's the ability to be able to come in and do multiple assessments over a course of time, so you can see where you're improving, you're filling some of the gaps. So let's get on with it. If anybody's got any questions as we go through this, you're more than welcome to put some any comments into chat, and I'll keep my eye on those. I'm on this session today on my own, so I'll try and do the best I can. That there is quite a lot to get through. So yeah, let's crack on and have a look. So what do people get out of assessments? Let's just start off by talking about, what is a self-assessment? It's a couple of things. It's a self-evaluation. It's trying to understand exactly where you are in your PMO career in terms of competency, skills, knowledge, and behaviour. And what has always been interesting, I think, for a lot of PMO practitioners, myself included, is that when you're doing the role, and if there's not a lot of you doing it within your organisation, or you don't know many other PMO people, it's really hard to try and judge, where am I? How good am I at what am I doing? Am I doing the right kind of things? Am I focusing my development in the right kind of areas? All of those kind of questions really get answered with the competency framework. And also, a competency self-assessment is about being able to study really your own performance, and then crucially is how you can think about where you might make some improvements. So self-assessment is very much about trying to understand how well you're doing. How do you know that you're doing well or not so well? And then how to think about how you might be able to do things better. I think we all recognise that in PMO, there are lots of different aspects to our role. There are a lot of different facets to it. There's a lot of different improvement areas that you could focus on. And it's like, where to start, what's the most important? All of those kind of things get answered in the competency framework. I'd be really interested, if anybody if you just let me know, how many people have actually already got the competency framework or purchased it, or indeed you might already be a member and you might have already started to use it and want to come and have a refresher on this session. I'd be just really interested, just if you want to just drop it into chat and just say yes, no, whatever. It'd be really just useful for me to just understand the audience that we've got here today. So well, why are people doing them? For a number of different reasons, and I'm sure there's bound to be one on here that will resonate with you, which is for me personally, when I was looking for this kind of thing, it was to understand how am I stacking up against what might be classed as being a standard, just to for my own personal kind of confidence levels, really. Also, I wanted to be able to use it to be able to show to my manager that the kind of development that I'm looking for, I can kind of back it up with some insights from a self-assessment and use it as a basis for conversation in that way. So those were my main reasons why I wanted them. It didn't exist when I wanted it. But hopefully you can see some things on here that, will resonate with you and where you are today. And again, some of the reasons change really as you go through your career, as you become more experienced, you do more roles, you work on different kinds of projects, different kinds of PMOs. Your reasons will change over time. But, for a lot of people, it is a couple of things that I'd mentioned, which, including things like I want to get lined up to promote, I want a new challenge, all of those kind of things come into the mix with something like this. And again, for the first time, because it is very much specifically for PMO people and the role that they do, it is the only thing that really out there that you could use. So what does it mean for you then? So when you're doing a self-assessment, essentially it's going to mean a couple of things. Is that there's more ownership placed on you. And what I mean by that is that often we can go through our business corporate lives, and you're working within a PMO and you're doing a particular role. And you can find that often the organization's making the choices for you in terms of where the development needs to be. And that can be for a number of reasons. It could be a case of that they putting a lot of people through certain training courses, or you're using online portals for learning, those kind of things. But actually, this allows you to take a little bit more control and a little bit more ownership, and say, well, actually, these are the areas that that I'm identifying as being areas that I think we really need to be thinking about development for myself. But interestingly, with a competency framework, you can also do this from a team point of view as well. So I'll talk about that in a second. So it does give more, puts more ownership on you. But again, it means that you have to think really deeply about the work that you've been doing, the experience that you've gained. And that does take time and reflection. And I'm not just going to talk about, off the cuff, it takes time and reflection. Today, I want to talk a little bit deeper about what we mean by reflection, because I think we gloss over it a lot of the time and say, yes, is it just I'm just going to sit in a quiet room and think for 5 minutes about what I've been doing? It's more than that. And I want to show you today, the practicalities of really doing good reflection that can help you get the most out of doing a self-assessment. So what it means is that there'll be a commitment, and the commitment is that from you to yourself, in that you're wanting to do more with the role that you perform in, the career that you have, to be a professional around PMO. And these are some of the things that professionals do. Look at any kind of profession out there, that is that requirement to do that kind of career building, CPD, taking time to think about your career. Self-assessments, again, massive in areas like the medical field, where practitioners every day have got to be thinking about the things that they do, reflecting on that and thinking about how they can do things better. Again, these are just one of the things that, if you want to be seen as being a true advocate in the profession of PMO, these are the kind of things and activities that you should be planning into your daily, weekly, monthly, yearly working life. There is an aspect of this is opening you up in terms of conversations, and assessments are about, yes, you can do them very much as an individual, as a personal thing, but again, it's being able to utilize these and use these with your managers. And even if your organization is not aware of House of PMO, it's not a corporate member or anything like that, it is there is the book, so you can talk to them, you can buy that, and you can talk to them about this is what you've been utilizing and using. It has got pedigree, it has got out there as a standard, and it allows you to start opening up conversations directly with your manager about your opportunity, your gaps that you're identifying, your development, and so on. It's a great addition to that kind of performance review process. It's also, as I said, is that preparation time, and we will talk about that in a little bit more detail. But it is about giving you the time to do it. And I can't stress it enough, because the number of people that think this is a great idea, I've looked at loads of benefits for doing this, still can't seem to find the time to do it. So this is very much something that is within your remit. How important is it in everything that you're doing? I would argue that it's very important in terms of your career and where you're going. And then, of course, there's the evidence, because any kind of self-assessment needs the evidence to back up what it is that you're assessing. So we talk about doing the self-assessment. It's actually the physically ticking of boxes and things like that can take 10 minutes. But the real work is about being really thinking and reflecting about what it is you've got and why you're giving things a certain score, but also how do you then back up the scoring that you're doing, which is about the evidence and the evidence gathering. So those are the things that are in store for you if you really want to go down the route of doing a PMO self-assessment. So as I told you, it's based on the competency framework. A self-assessment is about assessing yourself against the competencies, but also the knowledge, skills and behaviours. So what you're seeing on screen right now is the 24 competencies that are spread across 4 different domains. So what you'll see here is all the competencies. Now, when you come to do a competency self-assessment, you have the option to do it in 2 different ways. You can either do a self-assessment against all the competencies. So everything that you're seeing on screen there, you can assess yourself against all of those. Chances are you might look at some of those and you think, well, actually, I don't do that. It's not, it's not something that our organisation does, or I'm not at that level, or, whatever it might be. But you can still do a full assessment if you want to. The second way of doing a self-assessment is to do it via a role. And within the competency framework, what we published was 4 core PMO roles, which were administrator, analyst, manager, and director. Now, what you can do is use the self-assessment tool just against those roles, because what we've done is made sure that when it comes to certain roles, certain competencies are more important than others. So it means you do a shortened version against an assessment against these competencies. The other thing in there as well, as I said, is that there's knowledge, skills and behaviours, and we have a long list of those, and I'll show you those in a second. But essentially, you've got 2 different ways to do it. The other thing about the PMO Competency Framework is that it's done with 4 different contexts. And let's have a look at what we mean by the 4 different contexts. So we all know, if you're working from a PMO point of view, but you can be working in different types of contexts. So you can be working in a project-related type PMO, program, portfolio, and something that we call Centre of Excellence, that hopefully many of you recognise are it's where we do the work where we're pushing the ecosystem in place, and that's like the processes, the tools, the templates, all of those kind of things. We collectively call that kind of work the Centre of Excellence. And you probably look at that and you think, well, actually, I work across a couple of those, or all of them, or just one of them. Again, the competency self-assessment allows you to do an assessment against the role that you're performing and then the context in which you're working. So, for example, if you're a project analyst and that you're actually working around program as well as Centre of Excellence, you can do an assessment against both of those different contexts at the same time. So I'm going to show you today just some preamble, the background to it, and then I'm going to show you the tool. So, there's a lot take in, but we are recording this session, and if you're really interested in looking back, taking it at your own pace, you'll be able to do that. Make sure that you at least a free member of House of PMO, and you will be getting that on your inbox next week. So let's move on. We talked about those different knowledge, skills and behaviours as well, because we know that, with competency areas, you can't just perform things like, risk management or support risk management without there being knowledge that you draw on, skills that you need to do that, and the way that you do that. So we know that competencies, you can be, an expert level in it, but there is a certain knowledge, skills and behaviours that go hand in hand with being able to perform that competency well. So that's the areas of that go hand in hand with the competencies. I'm just going to backtrack. So we've got the competency, we've got the knowledge, skills and behaviours, we've got the different roles that exist in PMOs, and we've got the different contexts. Now, the way that a competency assessment works is that it comes down to the scoring. And we have something called proficiency levels. Now, proficiency levels are different levels of how you are performing against each competency. And we use proficiency levels in such a way that they have indicators. So, for example, if we're thinking about scoring ourselves as I'm a project analyst, I'm working in a program type of context, and I want to have a look at the competency area of risk management. When you start to have a look at that, you will see that there are different indicators, and these are these words that are underneath the headings: foundation, intermediate, advanced and expert. And what those indicators are different types and examples of work that you would be carrying out that demonstrate competency. And the different levels, so if you read from the left to the right, so the foundation is obviously more of an entry level, something that you're perhaps starting to do new, or you could even be new to PMO, and a lot of the work you're doing is at that foundational level. Or it could be that you've moved into a new role and there's a new competency that you've never tackled before. You'll be looking around the foundation level. And then basically what you're doing is using the indicators. So you're reading through the different examples to say, yeah, I'm doing that kind of work, or I'm not quite at that level. So this is, it's a very subjective part to it, in terms of, this is why self-assessments are, yes, you can do this as an individual and score yourself advancing everything. However, the real value in this is when you're starting to use it, and using it, properly, being truthful in terms of what it is that you have got experience-wise, but also when you come to use it with managers and other people to validate, what kind of scoring that you've got. And I'll show you that again in the system that we're using. So that's how it's done. So you might read some of the indicators and think, well, actually, some of these are not quite how I do things or what we're doing. They're just there as indicators. And the idea is to give you an idea about what we're talking about in terms of each level. And again, in the book, it goes into more detail about those proficiency levels. However, you'll see this in the self-assessments as we go through, and I'll show you the real examples on the live system. There are different indicators for different competencies. And again, you're just using them as a kind of guide to say, well, yeah, I think the kind of things that I'm doing are probably more around the intermediate level. Because remember, you're going to have to provide evidence for everything that you're marking down as well. So hopefully you're still with me, still making sense. Any questions so far, just drop them into the chat. I can see the chat right in front of me as well. So we talked about the context, the knowledge, skills, behaviours, the proficiency levels. So how does a PMO self-assessment work for you? Well, you're assessing it against a standard. And this is something that, again, is the only thing that exists at the moment in terms of, that's out there, that's freely available for PMO people to use. It's the first time that we put together, anything really in this field that's allowing people to say, yeah, I'm a PMO analyst and I want to see the kind of things that are expected of me in the role that I'm performing at different levels. So again, a great place to start. If you've never done anything like this, it's going to be a real eye-opener to you. Obviously, it's going to allow you to identify some gaps, because you look at, with a competency self-assessment, what we've also done, certainly when you do the assessment against a particular role, we have put certain levels that would be expected of a PMO analyst, for example, against some of those core competencies that they're required in their role. We've already put a level or proficiency level that you should really be operating at. And again, you can have a look at where you might be in relation to both standards and identifying some of the gaps. Obviously, this then allows you to dig deeper into choosing how you're going to close those gaps. There's a lot of information available both in the book and on the system online that allows you to start thinking about, now I can start to see clearly where the gaps might be. I can start to think about my development plans a little bit more thoroughly, and also being able to have better conversations with managers and the owner of the training purse strings as well. Again, it allows you to benchmark yourself against a wider, standard that's been put together by people from PMO industry, PMO community, far and wide. So again, if you're certainly operating in a PMO where it's only you or one other, sometimes it's really difficult to be able to understand how you may be performing or stacking up against what's classed as being, the PMO roles that are out there in the wider marketplace. So that kind of informal benchmarking. And also with this assessment, it allows you to do a view and a look at where you might want to be progressing to. Certainly on the online tool, it allows you to do assessment against where you are now, but it also allows you to have a look at it against the different roles. So, for example, if you're a PMO manager that's currently working, very much around a program type of PMO, you'll be able to look at the assessments then that are required for working at that portfolio level, for example, and it will show you the gaps and where you might want to focus. So again, really useful tool in terms of career development type steps. It's always good to understand what competent looks like. Again, it's we've said with these assessments that if your organization is not doing some of or utilizing some of the competencies that are in the book, that's okay today. But again, we've got to think about your career over longevity, which could be 15, 20, 25 years. This is good to see, that there are other competency areas that are expected in a wider marketplace, for PMO roles, and to be informed about that, and to be, to at least to know it. It's that classic of a known, rather than not understanding, perhaps how other organizations, do these roles and what's expected of them. It's really good for understanding common language and terms. Certainly within the book, not so much within the online tool. For each competency, there are a lot of different areas of kind of tools, processes, templates, all these different kind of things that go into that competency area, which again are really useful for anybody working in PMO today. We've already talked about it being good for a performance review, and you can probably, see that how nice that could be to sit down with a manager, not only to talk about your experiences over the last year, 6 months, however it might be, but better planning for that development. And people do use them for things like the salary negotiations and promotions. And if you're interested in that particular aspect, we've just done a session, I think it was probably about 4 weeks ago, about how to secure an increase or a promotion. You'll be able to see that in the members library. And then finally, it is actually, a really useful tool to help you write a CV and a resume, because it is showing you, these are some of the core competency areas, and you should really be covering those kind of things off on your CV or your resume. So it gives you some really good pointers as to how to perhaps put down your details on a CV, a profile, or whatever it might be. So that is, one of the reasons why it's been really useful for people in their PMO careers. This is just showing you very briefly of the system, but we talked about, there's gaps, and also being able to look at a current role that you're in and do an assessment against that. But also, we can also do assessments and look at the different roles. So what you're looking at here is a PMO manager at a portfolio level, and these are just the core competencies. So as a very basic, you can do just an assessment on the core competencies. There are others that you can select. So again, I'll show you how that works. But again, we've just from a House of PMO point of view in a competency framework, these are classed as being the core competency areas in which this person is doing an assessment against. And what you can see here is what the required level is with the black line. So again, we've set some proficiency levels, which you can see in terms of the F, the I, the A, and the E, for particular roles and particular context. And then you can see where that person's current level is, which is the blue. So very quickly, you can just see, where you're scoring against a particular standard. And that's what that one is showing you. And again, for this particular individual, they're, doing expert, competencies around the delivery support and also the governance frameworks, and perhaps need to be thinking and looking at their gaps that they might have around assurance and capacity management. So it's just interesting just to, just quickly see. We also talked about how actually with corporate membership House of PMO, you can do this from a team as well. So we have corporate members that have got anything up to 200 people that are all utilising this particular tool. And what this allows them to do from a manager point of view, this is what you're looking at. And it's just 2 employees on this particular example. But from this manager's point of view, It's allowing them to see from a team, where have we got our bases covered and where do we need to perhaps think about in terms of development or bringing in other people that might have some skill sets that will kind of cover off some of the other competencies that we need to get better at. So again, it's simple spider diagrams, but, quite powerful if you've not really had this opportunity before to see, what have we got in terms of capability within the PMO. So I've rattled them off. So we've got key points. We've got 4 different role profiles that you can do an assessment against. However, we said that you can do a full assessment anyway. So it doesn't matter if, role's not there. You can pick the nearest thing to it, but you can also do an assessment against the whole thing. We've got the different contexts because we know that PMO people are working in different kinds of contexts with their PMOs. And again, that's covered off. You can do it against for different contexts. We've got the different progression levels. So you can do an assessment on the online tool against your role as it exists today, but you can also set where you'd like to perhaps be in the next year, in the next 5 years, and also allows you to see where you may be today and where your work is cut out for you going ahead into the future. But again, it makes it visual. You can see it. It gives you something to plan towards. We've got the indicators, which these are the things that are helping us to understand which proficiency level we're at for each particular competency. They're not exhaustive. We couldn't put down every single kind of thing that a PMO person would be doing in that competency area at that level, because there's so many different bits and pieces that people do. But the indicators that are there should be fully understandable, just generally from your work in PMO. You should be able to kind of grasp and think, where I'm sitting in between. Interesting when it comes with the indicators, we always say you score down rather than up. So if you're looking between, say, foundational level and the intermediate and you're not quite sure where you are, score yourself down. But, this is the psychology of self-assessments is always interesting because people always want to make sure that they score up maybe. But there you go. But again, this is about getting the most out of it. We've got knowledge, skills and behaviours that are pretty straightforward. We don't have proficiency levels and indicators for the knowledge, the skills and behaviours. It's very much a yes, no. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we come to have a look at the actually online example as well. And then we've got the evidence and the evidence gathering. So for everything that we're doing and scoring ourselves on, we've got to be able to back it up. Yeah, so we'll talk again about evidence, and I can show you what we mean by that kind of evidence. So for the PMO competency self-assessment, there are 4 different things. You've got to be able to select what you're going to score yourself against, which is either doing the role profiles or the full thing. You've got to have that time to reflect, and we're going to talk about reflection in a minute. You've got to put some time aside to actually assess, which can be quite a quick process if you've done that kind of reflection and you understand what you're doing in terms of the self-assessment. And then there's the evidence gathering. So again, evidence gathering is not something that we generally do on a day-to-day basis, because if you've not thought about doing self-assessments before and doing that reflection piece and thinking about your longer term goals around career and in PMO, you'll probably not be thinking in an evidence kind of way. But if you're really going to get the most out of doing a self-assessment like this, you'll start to get into that mindset of, oh, actually, this is going to be a really good example to demonstrate X or Y. So those are the 4 components that come into doing that self-assessment. We will get onto the tool. However, I just wanted to just talk a little bit about reflection. And there are a couple of models, because I think we do enough of this, which is thinking about, when we say we have to reflect on our career, our experiences, what it is that we do, we kind of gloss over it and say, well, that's just, just thinking about what I might have done over the last week or the last year or whatever it might be. And actually there are a process, there is frameworks out there. And I know how much a PMO practitioner loves a framework. We like to, to have a process. And I just wanted to just share a couple with you. This is one of them. And, it's again, used quite a lot in different, different professions that are out there, where it's that kind of cycle of, that you're doing, you have the experience, but you're thinking, and what's your thoughts about that, the evaluation of it, analysing that, coming to a conclusion and having an action plan. This is one of the first kind of reflective cycles frameworks that came, to fruition back in 1988. However, I prefer this one for a kind of PMO professional, which is the Bassett one from 2013, which is the integrated reflective cycle. And the reason why I like this is because of that theory one, because I still think within the PMO world, there are so many emerging things all the time. And I still think that there is a lot of theoretical learning that goes alongside practical and the realities of what it is we do. And personally, from somebody who likes to learn a lot about things that are going on, which are emerging. And I can't be the only one that can, that will quite like this. But you've got the experience, and you're going to be thinking about the experience that you have, and having that reflection on it is thinking about, yes, what went well, what didn't go so well, what do you think could be improved, how did you feel about it, assumptions that were made about, why you're doing it, all of those kind of things. And I think the interesting piece for me then is that theory bit, which is actually once you've had that time to reflect properly, I think you then start to be able to pull out, actually, this is where I think I fell down, and actually I think I probably need to know a little bit more about that. That's why I like this one, is because of the learning bit, and because it's what the House of PMO is all about. We're trying to plug gaps in all this stuff that goes on in the PMO world that's always emerging. It's like, what do we need to know? And sometimes there are little pockets of learning rather than a full-blown training course. And this for me is a really interesting piece of the competency framework, because it's allowing you to start to think about, yes, there's some theoretical stuff here that actually I've not been keeping up to date on, or I feel like I'm a bit out of that. Maybe I've not been doing that in my role for the last year. You're moving into a new role, whatever it might be. And I think it's a really good pointer to say, I've got some gaps here that need a textbook thinking, which I can then start to think about how I incorporate that, which is actually using that reflection, using that learning to then prepare yourself for future experiences. So what I've done, just to give it a little bit more context and make it a little bit more real, is to pull out an example of how it works. So here we've got an indicator level for a portfolio level competency. I think this one is all about administration. Yeah, so it's one of the most simplest competencies. And you can see here with this working at a portfolio level, we've all got administration to do. It doesn't matter what role you're doing, there's always going to be some admin. So for this one, I wanted to pull out this role where you're facilitating kind of portfolio level workshops. It doesn't say what kind or anything like that. But this, for me then, in terms of thinking about this particular piece, is my reflection on it is that actually most of it went well, but there was a bit where I'm feeling like I'm starting to lose some control of some of the attendees. I'm sure if anybody's done any kind of facilitation of any workshops, you'll probably know exactly what I mean about that bit. But again, this is what it comes to that reflection bit about why, what are my thoughts about that? What went well? What didn't go so well? What could I, why did I think that they might have been going out of control? All of those kind of self-reflection pieces. But it's this bit where actually the theoretical thing is that actually I think I'm going to need to just have a look on, read up. Maybe it might be for the first time. It could be a refresher. Thinking about some facilitation techniques that are out there around managing participants. And interestingly, I had this for me myself about 18 months ago. And I actually got quite a lot out of doing a search for some podcasts, because I was walking my dog, and I thought, well, I ain't got any, I really want to try and nail this, and I'm walking my dog. I might as well have a listen to some podcasts. And I just literally put in facilitation, and stuff came back at me. I listened to a few of them, and brilliant. I was able to, think about how I then how am I going to overcome, what am I going to do with that kind of insight that I've got from reflection, theoretical stuff that I've been listening to. And then actually, I think what it needs is a different kind of exercise that's actually going to be something that I can keep in the toolbox, that I can bring back out if, people are starting to go off into on different tangents. So that's how the reflection pieces are working. And I think this is, hand in hand with doing the self-reflection as well, that you need in order to be able to do the competency framework. But I just think it's just worth it not glossing over this whole reflection piece. And these are things that are not necessarily something you're going to do every time you're doing a self-assessment. These are things that you should be doing on a daily or weekly basis. Okay, so do you want to have a go at it with me? And let's have a look at the tool. So the tool that we're using, again, it's a membership benefit. House of PMO members, they're able to use the online tool. Like I said, you can get the book, you can do it in the book, but you don't have some of them, obviously, the functionality that a piece of the website can give you. CAMEA is purely focused on competency frameworks. That's all they do. They do them for organizations, they do them for professional bodies like House of PMO. It's all they do. So what they've done is basically got the competency framework, PMO competency framework has been put into the CAMEA system, and that's what you're going to be able to use. So we've set it up in there. People come on board, they get the membership, they get the access to doing this self-assessment. And again, as I said, corporate members can get them for the entire team. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to show you what the actual tool looks like itself. So just bear with me and I will show you the tool. Okay, so hopefully you can see the website, yeah? And this is what happens when you first come on and log in to the system. So we've got, we're going to use somebody as an example. This is Geraldine, and this is her access to a competency framework. Now, she's got a couple of things she can do, and she's already done some of them. So we're going to click straight onto My Competency. What you can see straight away, goes straight into it, is that if you're on the right-hand side, she's a PMO administrator and she's working at a project level. That's what she's doing today. So she wants to do a self-assessment against a particular role, which is absolutely fine. However, I did say to you that you can do it against the entire thing, which is here. So when you first come in here, you can do it all, and you can drop them all down and you can do all the self-assessment against the entire thing. And there it all is, all different contexts, and you can crack away and you can do that. So when you first come into this, bit of a not quite sure what I'm doing. So one of the best things you can do is you can add what job profiles that you want. So we said that Geraldine is currently doing the project, the PMO administrator role. That's her current role. But she also wants to think about doing some, the stuff that I said in terms of progression. So she also wants to have that opportunity to do it against a PMO analyst position. And she also wants to think about maybe doing it a PMO analyst at a program kind of context as well. So these are her next career steps, is what she's thinking about. And then she's got an aspirational role to be a PMO manager, and she's put that in there too. So when you choose and select what you want to do it against, it then allows you to pick them off here. So let's go and have a look at her current role. And let's choose the administrator one, because it's competency area that most people will be doing or be familiar with. So we've got a competency framework. You can do it with a book with you, or you can, there you go, there's the indicators that we were talking about. So it gives you a little bit of an overview about what that competency area is, which is administration. And then it's got the indicators and the different levels. So what Geraldine will do is come in this and say, I want to do my self-assessment against this competency area. And I read through the different indicators and say, well, yes, I'm already doing minutes. I do the kind of general team support and travel and all that kind of stuff. Been doing that for a while now. I look at the intermediates. I'm definitely foundation. That's fine. So what about intermediate? And actually I look along and I'm like, yes, okay, I'm reading through some of this stuff. Yeah, I've been doing loads of this stuff. I've been doing my job for 18 months now. I feel really comfortable with this. And actually now I've started to do a lot more, stepping up, doing some of the facilitation type stuff as well. So she's scoring herself as an advanced level, which is down here. But you can see for the job level requirement, because she's doing assessment against that particular job role of PMO administrator, and we've already said that we put certain levels against competencies within roles, you can see that actually for this level role, she only needed to be around the intermediate level to be competent at doing this role, at doing this particular aspect of her role. That is how it's working. Yeah. So if we save that and close it, we can see back on this screen at the scoring, you can either go into each one, it's like we did then, read it and score it while it's there, or you might be somebody who prefers to do it in a book, and then you just want to come into the system and you can just do it here. You can just do your tick, 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 tick all the way down. So you can see here against the job role requirement, and then you'll see the evidence box. So for this one, she's got to be able to put in what the evidence is to be able to demonstrate that she's doing the level that she said that she's doing. So for this one here is that, she's been managing the onboarding process for all the hires within the organisation for the last 12 months. And because a manager is also in the system, the corporate view, the manager can also comment on the evidence as well. And then to complete it is the evidence, which is she's uploaded the onboarding process that she's been created, which she created and actually ran with and managed. So she's got that all there and kind of got that one kind of ticked off. The really interesting thing about the system as well is that you can come on and do this whatever you want. So if you find that you're, you've done something specifically really well, or something that is really taking you on to the next level in competency areas, we've also got a thing called time traveling, which allows you to see where you are against a certain point. So for example, if we have a quick look at this, we can see the time travel is from the self-assessment level that we did back in February. And then this is the one that they're doing today. So you can see, whenever you're coming in and doing this, you can actually see progression as well against some of the competencies that you've been scoring against. So it's quite a nice little feature when you're coming in to be able to see that actually there is change that's happening. So let's have a look at the second aspect of it. So with the PMO administrator role, we have stipulated that you only need to pick off at least 2 of the following competencies. Yeah, that's purely about the level, the type of role that people are performing at this level. We're doing a lot around the administration and perhaps not as much as an analyst would be, but I'll show you the analysts as well as we go through. But you can see here that for Geraldine, she has to pick a couple of which areas she wants to self-assess against, and actually she's had a look at a few of them because whatever's relevant to her. So let's have a look at the reporting and insights one. So again, this is for the PMO administrator. I've got a little bit more detail here, and again you get more detail in terms of if you prefer to read things off rather than off screen, you've got the book there if that's better for you. You get details about what the reporting and insights and analysis competency is all about. So you've got that description level to give you that kind of intro to it. In the book, you do get more detail in terms of things like, what are some of the kind of artifacts that would go along with reporting and insights? What are some of the overlaps and different terms that you would expect to see, overlaps with different competencies and so on. So there is a little bit more in the book. However, in terms of being able to do a self-assessment, what you need is right here. So you've got that intro, and here again are our indicator levels for what is expected at a project kind of context for a PMO administrator in reporting insights and analysis. And you can see here that for this kind of level role, it is very much around that foundational level. But, again, you can set targets, which will be, I want to get up to a certain level, and I'll show you that again in a second. So you can see that the indicators for each one of these, that they're not going to be exactly how you do your job, because you know that obviously we're PMO roles vary. People do more of one thing, less of the other. But hopefully it gives you a good enough insight as to what would be deemed to be, an intermediate level in this competency. That you are competent at doing this particular competency. Yeah, it's a lot of competency words there, but hopefully you understand, how it's working. So where your insights are, so being able to think about this, you've got to be able to read and understand what the competency is about, understand what some of the indicators are, reflect and think on what your kind of indicators are, what kind of evidence that you've got to demonstrate that, and also thinking about maybe documentation that would be able to demonstrate that too. So you can see that, where the time, as I was saying, is a lot of prep, a lot of upfront thinking about this. It's understanding the competency framework first of all, and then starting to think about your own experiences and how you're then going to score against this. So she's going to carry on doing a self-assessment against the competencies. Now, again, with the knowledge, skills and behaviours, you'll see we haven't got all of them. These are just the ones that are considered to be the key knowledge, the key skills and the key behaviours for this role. Yeah, so a subsection of the full lot. So Geraldine, for these, are thinking very much about, looking down, reading a little bit more about what the knowledge bits are. There's not a lot of information there. It's pretty self-explanatory. And it is very much a yes and no. Yeah. Again, it's still got the evidence and the documentation points. You can't really do indicator levels in terms of knowledge, skills and behaviours because the competency framework would be huge. And actually, there's a lot of stuff already out there in terms of these kind of skill areas. But again, it's very much a yes and no, which at least gives you that kind of, all right, this is a prompt for me that, I know that I'm not great at some of this stuff, or I know that I need to get better at this kind of thing. And again, it's about that gap, showing you those gaps so you can focus on your development and your, getting experience in different areas. So again, knowledge, skills and behaviours is just a tick, yes and no. Let's have a look at a career step then. So what's that giving us is we're now doing a self-assessment against a PMO analyst at project level. What it's done, it carries on forward your self-assessment that you did at the administrator level. So you don't have to start again from scratch. It's already keeping your record. But what you can see now is that these are changing. Yeah, the levels of the job level requirements are changing because this is a PMO analyst role now. This is not a PMO administrator one. You can see here that you're choosing at least 5 from following competencies. Look how big that competency level, those competency lists are. There's more of them. Yeah, you can see with the core competencies, there's more of those too. You've got to do all of these. And again, your knowledge, skills and behaviours, look how much longer they become. Yeah, so Geraldine can see straight away, she's done a competency assessment on her current role. She can now see straight away where her gaps are. Yeah, she can see where if I'm going to be, working or getting that opportunity at analyst level, I can see for my own, for my own benefit, my own kind of like thinking about how I'm going to get there, I can see quite clearly what's going to be expected of me, so I've got to start thinking about, some of these areas that either I'm not doing enough on at the moment, or I've not had the opportunity yet. This is a good time to have that conversation with my manager about how I can start to develop some of these competency areas. It may be training courses, it may be shadowing other people within the team, it may be getting assigned to a new project, whatever it might be, but at least she can start to see, these are some of the areas that I'm going to have some gaps. And if you want to jump right down to an aspirational role like a PMO manager, you can see again that these are all the gaps that Geraldine's going to have to be thinking about going forward. Okay, so that is a self-assessment for Geraldine. So for again, a quick look at all the different areas in terms of where she's got to where she's got gaps in terms of her current roles at the moment versus what's required. Again, we're still on the PMO manager one. We've got a quick view there. And then also we can have a quick look at the portfolio, and hopefully you can just see this, it's popped into another screen. And what this is showing you, again, is just a profile, high level. This is where she is in terms of current assessments against the PMO Administrator 1, a career step 1, career step 2. And also you can start to see that in spider diagram form as well. So this is our individual kind of portfolio that can be printed off, can be talked about with their manager. It's all there to see and to be utilised. And again, different reporting and different visuals on where she's got to be in for, different kind of doing an assessment against the whole thing. These are the areas where she's done the assessment and where she's not. So she might want to go and have a look at some of these. So the full portfolio there is everything that pops out of the assessment. So that is what Camille is allowing you to do, which is different to, obviously being able to use a book. And again, if you want to, you can just come straight in and do an assessment against the whole thing, which is, again, if you come back onto this, hopefully makes a little bit more sense now. We're doing it against project context. These are everything that you need to do assessments against. So if you want to do the whole thing against the project one, these are everything that you need to do. Now, what you can do is an assessment against the full thing like this, and then you can add your role profiles in, and it will bring them in to your role profile. So you will get, as soon as you add a role profile in here, as soon as you add one in here, having done the full thing, you'll be able to come straight in and get your view, because you've already filled out the whole thing. It will give you it against the role profile. Okay. So that is the self-assessment tool. As you can see, you could in reality come down and tick all of this. That's pretty straightforward. It's the evidence piece, and it's the documentation. The evidence piece relies on you to be able to be thinking about what it is that you're doing. How are you demonstrating that you're hitting certain levels against certain competency areas? That's the bit that takes the time. How you want to evidence that, maybe with documentation as well. Again, it takes time to be able to do that. So this is the bit where the tool can show you a lot of things, just demonstrate a lot of things to you, but actually it's all about the thinking and reflection, and getting all your documentation and your thoughts lined up in order to be able to demonstrate that when you make that self-assessment level, this is what it's based on. The other thing that the House of PMO is working on is a couple of things. Camille will be refreshed. It has a new skin coming on it at the end of 2023, beginning of 2024, which means that we're going to be looking at the Learning tab, which allows us to essentially look at, if you have got gaps or you want to do more learning around any of the competency areas and the indicators that are demonstrated, we're going to start to populate the learning that becomes available. And that'll be learning that's available through the House of PMO in terms of member type sessions. It's going to be things that are available in terms of training courses, things, bite-sized learning that's available, all of that kind of good stuff. So that is what's next on the backlog in terms of where we go with this tool. So the learning, when you start to see the gaps, there will be learning available, which will allow people to dive into certain articles, or think about, here's some formal learning that I might want to try and get the budget for from my manager. So that's the next level of things from a House of PMO point of view, in terms of we've got planned with it. But in terms of the self-assessment for you, hopefully you can see the benefits that this is going to bring to you in terms of being able to do a self-assessment against a standard, to help you better target your learning, your development, to have better conversations with your manager about where you are now, where you want to get to, all of those kind of things. It starts to be, just a little bit more it's all a bit, a lot easier, a lot more real to be able to show and demonstrate with something like this. So just to finish us off today, as I said, the competency self-assessment you can do, via the book. It's there, it's in the back of the book. It is just a simple tick exercise, though. You don't get obviously the functionality with some of the stuff you've seen online. And then there's obviously guides and stuff. We've got videos and things to help you along the way. And then you can get going pretty much straight away. So that is it for today's session. It's all about getting started with a PMO competency self-assessment. I think we've probably covered what we said we were going to do.